Greetings and welcome to another episode of Black Mental Health Matters. My name is Lakeisha J. Rigg, educator and CEO of LJR Training and Coaching. It is my pleasure to have you on another episode, joining us for what is going to be a very insightful conversation. So thank you so much. And we'll get back to you in just a moment. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone. So, today our topic is anxiety in teens, and we have the pleasure of learning from Miss Chelsea Dade and Mr. Daniel Ware. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, you're welcome. So, I would like for us to get started with introducing yourselves. So, Mr. Ware, if you could go ahead and tell the people a little bit about yourself, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. So my name is Daniel Ware. I'm a licensed mental health therapist here in the state of Washington. I primarily focus on, I'm like a blend of a social worker and a therapist in my current role because I'm a school-based mental health therapist, and where I focus on like trauma. I am a psychodynamic therapist and just helping families also connect with resources here in the Puget Sound and also the counties surrounding. So that's my primary job.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate you sharing with the listeners about yourself and what you do for the community. Miss Chelsea Dade, if you would go ahead and let the people know a bit about yourself, what you do, and just anything else you might want to share.
Sure. Thank you for allowing me to be on this amazing platform. I'm Chelsea Day, and I am the founder and owner of Communicate for Health Justice, CFHJ for short. Founded in 2018 and based in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, Communicate for Health Justice is a forward thinking communications and advocacy firm mixing equity and social justice concepts into health communication ideas. And I am very passionate about the topic of mental health. I was a psychology major in undergrad, and yeah, I'm excited to dig more into this important topic.
Thank you so much, both of you, for introducing yourselves. So we will get right into it so that the listeners can learn from both of you. So I'll just start off, and whoever would like to start first, and then the other person can chime in accordingly. That would be great. What are some common signs of anxiety in teenagers? Well, you know what? Why don't we kick it off with you, Mr. Ware, if
Not a
you
problem.
could. Thank you.
We were trying to be nice and just let the other go. This is a kind of a short list because anxiety can show up in so many different ways depending
Mhm,
on the environment in which someone grew in. So I just grabbed a short list, but being irritable, being nervous, not being able to sit still, or just kind of their shoulders are in their ears, so to speak. Having a hard time concentrating, or can't even think of even basic words like the it, and a lot of times it looks like I don't know. Um,
mm,
excuse me. And it could even, and it's not just in our actions, but it's also how our body responds. It could be even nausea, vomiting, not being able to sleep, headaches, stomach aches, body pain, even.
mm.
And the list can go on as well.
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. As I mentioned on the onset of the show, I'm an educator. I teach high school students, and this week is the end of the first quarter. So I definitely hear what you're saying and observe these type of these signs, especially now. So absolutely, thank you for sharing that, Ms. Dade. If you would like to chime in and add, if not, I could ask another question, but I just want to give you an opportunity to share.
Yeah. So I think as someone who isn't a clinician, talking about this subject, I can probably speak best to my own experiences as a teen. I'm no longer a teen. But anxiety, I think, is something that I have dealt with for a pretty long time. I would say probably since I was, 10 or 11. And I think it came from a lot of pressure, um, as an oldest daughter, you know, um, as someone who grew up in a very, accomplished household and family. And so there's lots of pressures that, come with that. And personally, grew up with a lot of expectations to succeed and to avoid mistakes essentially at all costs, and to always set a good example. And so whatever signs come out of that, whether that's maybe being more isolated from other teens, or the ability to take a break, those might be some common signs, just speaking from my own experience.
Oh, thank you. That is very important. And thank you for, sharing that this is something that you know to be the case with your experiences yourselves. And I really appreciate you sharing some of the underlying reasons, and so how we have, been raised and what have you, that may contribute, that do contribute, to the anxiety and the signs. And I definitely can, understand what it's like to grow up in a household with a lot of expectations, and just feeling like you have to be on 10 and doing everything and perfectly, recovering perfectionist myself. So I know I grew up in a household with educator, um, uh, military, and so forth. And so that definitely does lend itself to that. So thank you for sharing that. And so the next question we have up here is factors that contribute to rising anxiety levels. Um, if you would like to share, Ms. Dade, so that way Mr. Ware can then add on to that. We'll try to make it fair and balanced.
Sure. So I mentioned before the pressures, kind of external pressures, and I think also there's internal pressures. There's that perfectionism aspect, that wanting to be perfect, and as I see in teens today, they have this additional factor, which is social media, and they have this kind of pressure to be on all the time. And the closest connection I can think to this from my own experience when I was a teen is that I had, a creative outlet, which for me was dance. Dance played a huge role in my life. I practiced dance from age 4 through 21 consistently, no breaks, no stops or anything. And having that creative outlet is really important. It, for me, helped to reduce a lot of those feelings of anxiety to the point that when I stopped doing dance when I was 21, I was like, oh wow, there's these new anxious feelings. And so now, as an adult, you have to find other outlets for that. But yeah, having a creative outlet that, if it is related to something social media based, I don't think there's necessarily an issue with that. But there have been a lot of unfortunate structural things that have removed creative outlets from school systems.
Mm.
Performing arts being removed, PE being removed. Different sorts of visual, creative classes and instruction being removed from schools, and that can not only not expose teens to important outlets that they can use while they're learning, but also it could even be related to potential career paths. So I think not having spaces, third spaces, sometimes that's how people refer to them, can kind of promote this feelings of anxiety if there isn't a space to kind of let that out.
Mm. Yes, absolutely. Mr. Ware, if you may just add on to that, please. Thank you.
I think she hit the nail on the head,
Mm.
frankly, because I live in South Seattle and um, can't find any outlets. I mean, and most of the time, it's not safe to do so. I mean, being frank, the front of my building got shut up Thursday night. And it's like, it just kind of, I was writing all my responses for this today, and I'm like,
Mm.
there's one, frankly. And, it's harder, growing up in the 80s, I remember when they were taking out all the, art, music, PE, and all
Mm.
that stuff because of funding, and they're doing it again in the schools that I work in because of funding or lack of being able to find someone. Um, and being a father of an African American girl who's now almost 22,
Mm.
I think about her anxieties, her worries, and she's worried about what we see, what the news is currently showing, state of the world. She's still living at home because she can't live on her own because of the rising cost of just existing. Uh,
Mm.
and I know both of you touched on like school and performance pressures. I've seen where I had a first grader, her hair was falling out because she was expected to be perfect 100% of the time. And the parents just didn't get it
Mm.
because that's how they were raised. And I know this country's opening up to gender and, uh, variety of gender and sexual orientations. However, there are still massive amounts of areas that are not accepting of it at all.
Mm.
Um, and the rising costs of food, water, housing, clothing. Like my daughter is very big in thrifting, so because she likes to get clothes,
Mm.
we're still running into racism, ageism, sexism, pickenism. At this point because it's still
Mm.
getting broader and broader. Um, and I know it's been for 3-4 years, but COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of the kiddos that I work with, they were either just hit kindergarten or were like in first grade, and so they're still being impacted by it because, well, all of this change. What am I supposed to do in their very formative years?
Right.
So there's a lot. I mean, I know we can probably sit here and just talk about like all the different factors and just what we do, or just what we experience as adults, and just go, what is this doing to a young mind?
Absolutely. As I'm listening to both of you, just everything that you're sharing is the truth in terms of contributing factors. From, as you said, the absence of outlets, including but not limited to performing arts. I happen to work at a high school that has a performing arts program, so there are outlets in that case. However, we talked about earlier as far as like sometimes the pressures, so it's kind of like a catch 22. They have that outlet, but some of them have expressed to me that they don't want to get involved because it's overwhelming on top of the academic piece. And then, speaking of COVID, um, as an educator, that loss of learning, like many students struggle with being academically deficient, and that contributes as well. If they don't feel that they are on par with where they should be, at their grade level, they feel bad about that. They feel embarrassed about that. So there are so many things in social media. Um, Even if they have an outlet and all the things that kind of check every other box, the social media piece, which we're going to get into next, is a distraction. Many school districts are having cell phone ban policies. Mine is one of them. But the addiction is real. The addiction is real. And so to police, if you will, a policy in place is very challenging. And school districts are struggling with that. Even with the policy, the kids are still, as I say, scrolling. I said all the time, I said, I see you scrolling. I've already shared with you that you're not supposed to be. So our next question, um, how does social media, and I know we touched on it a bit, but if you could elaborate, how does social media influence anxiety in teens? Ms. Dade, you want to share? I know Mr. Ware. I feel like I'm keeping count, which I feel like it's a little too early for my brain to do that, but I'm trying. So if you could share, Ms. Dade, what are your thoughts? I know you kind of introduced that point when you mentioned that was one of the factors. So if you could, please and thank you.
Sure. Social media. So I have maybe it's a unique experience with social media. My parents were pretty strict. I did not have social media until I believe college. So it was
Mm-hmm.
around. It was around, like, of course, there was MySpace and Facebook was like a big thing. But I was just not allowed to have it until 18. And then so by the time I got to college, I didn't use it until my senior year of college when I got a LinkedIn because everyone was like, get a LinkedIn. So, and that was, I graduated undergrad in 2016. So I can't do the math right now, top of my head, but that wasn't too long ago. So my experience, yeah, my experience though with social media is a little bit different because I did grow up in a space where that wasn't necessarily accessible to me. And
Mm-hmm.
now at my current age, I'm a little bit grateful for that because I do see the impacts and the effects on people's teens' mental health and again, the pressures to be perfect and to have, a beat face or, the contour and all these things. And I mean, that's just that perfection is not real life. But when your mind is growing, I guess the human brain is not developed until like age 25 or something. So, they're in a state of growing and understanding themselves. And so, teasing apart what is real from what is not is going to be challenging, and social media just kind of distorts that. And then I will furthermore say, if I was a young Black girl in growing up as a teen right now, I mean, I can only imagine the pressures. I think the fact that I was able to be removed from that was really helpful. But the constant comparison, the colorism, it's just a lot. So I personally would probably, I know it would be tough, but if I had a child, I'd find a way, hopefully, to have a balance with that social media because it's a lot.
Yeah, you touched on so many nuggets of wisdom is one of the things that I like to say in my class, dropping gems and wisdom. And I can relate to not having social media be something that was like a problem for me. Like not to throw generations, but I'm Gen X proudly. So there was like some dial up. It was just back in the day, and I'm like grateful now because I use social media too. I mean, this is streaming social media style, so it has its pluses. However, I'm not so addicted to it as some of the younger ones. So I'm grateful for that, as you said. And at the same time, being that I am an educator with high school teenagers now, I observe them. And, as you mentioned, being a young Black girl, I live in that space and I observe them, all the time. And it's hard to be dealing with, like you said, the various isms both of you mentioned, including but not limited to colorism, trying to look good, perfect. I hear the conversations, and to the best of my ability, I am uplifting and encouraging, and you look good and all this stuff or whatever, but it's very internalized when they're growing and developing, as you said, that brain is still developing up to about 25 or so. So to be worrying about how you look and be distracted and trying to like learn, it's a lot. It's a lot. So Mr. Ware, if you could chime in, that would be so great.
Yeah, I mean, with the social media has like a pro and a con to it. Um, and I'll start with the con since we're there. To both y'all's point, with with suicide rates, the one that's getting the biggest rise is Black girls. It's scary because it the all the perfectionism, and this is the problem that I have. And I'm an artist. My wife's an artist, and we watch art videos to get inspired or these types of things. And one of the biggest problems we have with social media, whether it's, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, even including YouTube or TikTok, is that they don't show, or very few show, excuse me, the process of failing. Like I cook, I bake, and I have never seen any social media artist like say, yeah, here's the 500 pounds of flour that I've ruined through baking and like dense bread, hard bread, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just that showing that like, yeah, you're gonna fail horribly. Like all the paintings I've done, I mean, my wife has sketchbooks of hands, eyes, mouths, and feet, like just practice and you
Mm-hmm.
should see some of the first feet. When you compare the two, it's like, wow, you've grown. And very few artists, very few influencers show that. They just show the end product, and it's like you haven't showed the work. And to talk a little bit about like, and I get both sides. Being a parent,
Mm-hmm.
kids are getting electronics way too early. I see 8-month-old, year-old have in the stroller with an iPad or a Surface, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're messing with the brain so much. But I also get it, and so I think that's where I think Miss Dade spoke about, like, it's too early. It's these types of things that are hurting kids because now they're getting used to it, and if you don't use it, you lose it, and the synapse gone. It's the reason why we should teach different languages like other countries, kindergarten, first grade, preschool, because they still have the neural connections. But we don't. We stick them in front of a computer and like, well, why aren't they curious? Why aren't they this? Because you stuck them in front of a computer. The good thing about social media, though, and we saw this. Where was it? What year was it? I think it was shortly after the pandemic, where Japan is traditionally you big no about mental health because of social media. We're reaching different areas that are usually not going to get anything close to this type of information, and we're seeing that like my daughter's generation to about 25, 26 are like, we want mental health services, even in Japan, or if they move here. And that's other countries as well, or people from other countries that move here because like, we want this. It's impacting, us as Americans, because we get to see, wait a minute, why does Europe get months off? Why do they get paternity care? That's actually one of the reasons why we got father paternity leave.
Hmm.
Because we're like, wait, we're doing business in a global world and America doesn't do this. Well, we want this. And so that's the good part, but it is an addiction. Like, addictions are hard because when folks talk to me about, like, well, it's not really an addiction, I said, okay, go without your phone for a week. Let me know how it works out. You can't touch it. No social media whatsoever. No nothing. No electronic. So it includes your TV, your radio, your phone, your tablet. You can't even look at it at work. You take it away for a week and see how well you adjust to it, and you'll see the detox effect, because so many people are, and it's like, what do I do with this?
Right.
I think Miss Dade actually spoke to it when she stopped doing dance around 21. She was like, oh, the anxiety's there. That's what happens, because these things feed us constantly, and that causes a lot of the anxiety as well. It's like getting fed constantly. When you lose it, then it's like, what do I do?
Right. Right. Yeah, no. So many good points that you shared. Thank you so much, Mr. Ware, including but not limited to when you were talking about what I took away from one of the things that you said is social media has been referred to as a highlight reel. So people don't see all of the struggles underneath the surface, if you will, of that iceberg that, as you said, you and your wife are an artist. Actually, me and my guy, we, in addition to both being educators, we're entertainers. He still actually rhymes, and every now and then I might hop on a track. And so with that being said, no one sees that we're making connections with people and we're reaching out and trying to go to an event here and there so that he can perform, and no one sees that. People just see your beautiful artwork, you and your wife, or see when we put together a song or whatever other creative things that we do. And I think that highlight reel, if you will, it kind of lends itself to that like perfectionism, like, oh my gosh, they have it all together, like, oh, that looks great, oh, she looks good, she's so contoured, oh miss, I want to look like that. And so then from what I observe on a regular basis with these teenagers that I teach is they're like afraid to fail, even when I'm instructing them on doing work. Miss, what page is this on? Like, they don't sometimes even want to try to look up things on their own. They just want to get it right to begin with. And failure is growth in that those of us who are a bit older and have, we've expressed that we haven't all been, sort of inundated with social media from our onset, and so we know, like, okay, I mess up, I rhyme a lyric, it doesn't sound good, I write it again, insert any creative thing, or we do a dance move. Fun fact, I also, dance too. I know we chatted on that, Ms. Dade. And so, okay, I mess up a step. Oh, well, I'm going to do it again, and I'm just going to have fun in the process. Some of these teenagers, because they grew up on social media, they don't know how to just have fun. It's okay, mess up. And so that's an excellent, point that you made among other points, but that just really stood out. So I will continue to our next question, but listeners, are you listening? Because these are, this is what we're sharing with you. So take away some takeaways, if you will. And I know we kind of have been touching on these things along the way, so feel free to just add. It's a fluid space conversation kind of thing that we're doing. So how do cultural factors influence the understanding of expression and anxiety in different communities? Whoever, like, off the top is like, I really want to dive into that. I feel like I'm going to back off from tagging who's next. Like, my brain is too tired right now for tagging. So whoever wants to share first, that would be great.
Sure. This one was difficult just because we have so many cultures, whether it's culture urge or microcultures.
Mm-hmm.
When I was just like doing the research, one of the themes I saw was each area has their good parts, and also their very big struggles. And I just went alphabetical, but I'll start with mine, actually, because I think it's going to be easier to speak on it. So a lot of people will tell me, well, you're a white male. I'm like, actually, I'm not. My family's of the Miami tribe in Ohio. So I'm actually half my mom's side of the family is Miami tribe, and my dad's side is from Wales. And I grew up on a farm in the middle of Ohio, and our worry or how it, we had an opportunity because we were able to, like, one of the biggest things or easiest, what, and I know Miss Dade touched on it, where it was like the dancing, the physical exertion of getting out those we did farm work. Like, we still had our anxieties. I had anxiety about homework or peer pressure or whatever, but you put 40 fence posts in the ground, you had a good day's work, after you cleaning out everything. So it's like, it was very, like, we still had our stressors, but we didn't have, growing up in the, I'm from the 70s, so it's like 80s and 90s where there was no social media, there was no nothing, and it was just like, you did your work, you did what you need to do, and you went to sleep and restarted. um but looking at it now as farm kids, farmers are just losing their, so they're losing generational homes, and so their anxiety looks like, what do we do? Our whole culture, our whole traditions, our heritage is wrapped up in this farm that's now gone. I don't know what they lost, losing their sense of self and sense of who they are. And then, in urban spaces, there is more influences, um, but there's that. And when I say urban, I'm thinking of like suburban and whatnot, um, where there is those pressures to, like, performance, and so there's a lot of nail biting. There's a lot of those typical anxiety things that we see, and then being a Christian and seeing the religious impacts and how most religions, I won't speak to all of them, in general, especially the more conservative ones, don't recognize mental health as health. Um, I got told flat out by my ex mother-in-law, that I should pray away the anxiety, should pray away the PTSD, and then she walks over and takes her high blood pressure meds. And I had a petty moment. I was like, well, if it works for mental health, it should work for your high blood pressure. If it doesn't work for high blood pressure, then why are you telling me I shouldn't take my Prozac? And
No, you're right. I'm just shaking hands with you. I get it. Oh, you're not feeling well. Just pray about it and just get some rest. I want to hear you finish, but I understand that is a cultural factor, especially as it relates to religion. So I get it.
yeah, and thinking about, um and like the next one I was going to do is the LGBT community. And I know I shortened it, just because I know I'll probably miss a letter if I go any further. Growing up in, rural churches, you always had that one, um, choir director that we didn't talk about, and they had their partner for the last 25 years that they've been living with, but it's their roommate. But if you say that, come out and say, well, I'm bisexual, or I go by they them, or whether it's sexual or gender orientation, they're throwing holy water on you. They're saying you're going to hell in a handcart, and it's like and it's like, send one message, because we all know, some at some point you've experienced, people have experienced, like, yeah, there's that choir director that's had a roommate for 30 years, and it's not just from the 80s, but even to this day. Um, and so those I can see where these are, and the culture influence, it's like when I was working in, as a behavior specialist here in Seattle, um, you don't even do activities that could be, quote unquote, woman, males did males, women, females did females, and there was like no adjustment to it whatsoever. And a lot of the boys I worked with, they love playing soccer because they were Somali refugees.
Mm.
Well, Seattle Ballet used to come and perform at our, school and gauge interest. And I remember one of the parents were like, hey, that's inappropriate. I don't want my boy to turn gay. His words, not mine. And I was like, well, I thought you wanted your kid to be good at soccer. He's like, I do. And I was like, ballet works all these, and I educated, did some psycho ed around like they work muscles, they stability, prevent from, I said, one of the big injuries are knee injuries or groin injuries. Ballet can help, yoga can help. And it was like trying to talk to a wall to change a wall because they were like, no, my religion says that boys can't mix with females or female activities. And I do want to, I want to stop there because I'm curious, like what Miss Dade's viewpoint on it, because even though I'm married to a black woman and have a black child, I will never understand fully what it means to be uh, black in America.
Well, thank you, first of all. And of course, I definitely want to hear what Ms. Sade has to say. But, thank you for sharing everything that you shared, including, your experience, how, you identify, racially, culturally, and, touching on some of the struggles, mixed messages from, religions and things of that nature. These are all true things that, contribute to this anxiety and things that many of us have struggled with and still struggle with. So absolutely, thank you so much. And Ms. Dade, if you would chime in, would love to hear what you have to say as well.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for sharing, Mr. Ware. Um, so I would say that for me, when I was, learning dance from ages 4 through 21, I see myself as, a darker skinned black, woman than black girl. I didn't necessarily connect some of the, I guess, more negative feelings or, negative comments as racism. I think because I started so young in that space. I started at 4 years old. And I mentioned I never took, any breaks really through it. So for me, dance was so integral to my identity that um, I actually, to an extent, given I was talking about, the perfectionism and kind of that to focus on success in the family, I was given a lot of messages around you can kind of outwork racism, you can outperform racism. And now, as a 30-year-old, I'm like, that's not true. But, back in the day, I figured, okay, I can just, get better and I can do 4 fouettes versus 3 fouettes, which is a
Mm.
ballet turn. And yeah, I just, that messaging definitely contributed to anxiety and perfectionism that I unpack today. But yeah, I mean, I think now when I look back, I think the racism that I experienced in dance, I think it was very internalized. I think it was happening to me, and I don't even think my brain was even keeping up with it. And so that's things like being the one black girl in the predominantly white ballet class, pretty much your entire dance career. My younger sister did rhythmic gymnastics with me, but when I was in dance, I was pretty much the only black girl, and this was in Northern Virginia. So it was incredibly isolating, and the way that I interpreted it was like, okay, well, let me just work harder. Let me just make my leap larger. Let me, make my smile brighter. And that's kind of how I internalized it. And I ended up being really good. I, got awards. I, competed not internationally, nationally. And yeah, you can't outperform racism. That's the way I see it now. But there are also a lot of stereotypes that played a role. There were moments when I was doing dance in high school that certain roles or certain poses were given to black girls versus white girls. I won't get too far into the details with that, but and then when I was growing up in ballet, there were oftentimes like racist comments about my body shape. So the ballet body, this is something that Michaela DePrince. I don't know if you all are familiar, but she recently passed away, and she was actually quite close to my age. I didn't realize she was 29. But she's a really well-known Black ballerina, and has a beautiful story of overcoming. But she was very vocal about her experiences as a Black ballerina, and I echo it 100%. I was not as good as her, but I do echo what she shared about comments or about body type, and all sorts of things like that. And when you're in that space, you just kind of internalize it. You don't really it doesn't really go anywhere. It kind of just sits in you, and then you kind of just try to work harder. That's really the only thing I can say. And then this was the early 2000s when I was primarily in dance, so the world of dance was not accommodating from things like lipstick. Lipstick did not always look right on me and my skin tone. Performance makeup, I remember in high school being told to change my performance makeup because it wasn't bright enough, but I was putting on less because if I put on more, it made me look like a clown because it didn't match my skin tone. um, and the tights that we were wearing, like, back in the 2010s, there weren't even colored tights that match different skin tones. Now we have Fenty, we have Fenty makeup, we have all these makeup things, but that was not a thing, when I was growing up. So like, it wasn't there. And the dance world was quick to remind me of that. But like I said, I think that the anxious feelings were just kind of building and building. And fortunately, I do, and I still love dance today, but I think that it was able to provide me again with that outlet to really express, I think, some of the maybe more negative feelings that I was internalizing. I remember when I went to college, I did a performance art piece on racism. And so part of it was like, they had this door kind of frame that you could walk through on the stage. And so part of my performance was actually demonstrating to the audience that this is how racism is. It's a door of opportunity. And so part of my role was like guiding people through the door in different ways, but it was like a metaphor, right? Like, this is the thing that black folks like me have to go through. It's a door of opportunity. The door can be open or it can be closed. And so that was me in college, and I was able to kind of work through some of these ideas. Fortunately, with the support, I had a really great dance professor, Leah Glenn, who was strict, but she was a really great inspiration to me and to many others. And she was, I believe, my first Black dance teacher. So my first Black dance teacher was when I was in college, even though I had several dance and gymnastics teachers before that. So all that to say, I think for me, being a darker skinned Black girl, a lot of the messages that I was receiving were just internalized. And for me, it was like, okay, let me just push harder and push better. But now at my current age, I recognize that I think I was just doing, the best that I could with the information that I had. But if I could tell a teen who is maybe, in dance, a young Black girl, that it's okay to, have those feelings and, maybe, share them with others. If there are other girls, other Black girls that maybe are feeling the same way. Yeah, it's okay to share out those feelings. You don't have to necessarily internalize them all and push yourself, constantly and constantly. It's okay to kind of sit with those feelings.
Thank you so much for sharing everything that you shared. I was like hanging on every word, really. Yeah, like growing up, my mother actually is about your shade, if not a little bit darker, and my father is lighter skinned, as they say in the Black community. But as I got older, I reflected, and I usually saw myself in the eyes of my mother. And so secondhand, I was made very aware of colorism. I know we touched on that. And it would always hurt me because of how connected I was with her. So I really appreciate you sharing your truth. And, those of us who are, Black girls, we, shared how we have that certain level of anxiety in general. But, unfortunately, the reality of, colorism within our communities and stuff like that has throughout my life helped me to see how much more of a struggle that is, for some of us. And so I appreciate you really sharing that. It is very much internalized. I know one of the topics in the Black community that we talk about is hair. And I remember growing up and hair just being such a struggle, always trying to make it look good because I have the what is it, the 4C? I don't know the hair types that well. I have the like my hair can get good braids kind of hair because it's nice and strong, if you will. You put it in a nice frame. But growing up, I was always trying to find a way like to have like my hair was actually straightened. Because that's just what was done. I didn't have a choice. I was a young girl, but I'm so glad that now, among other movements, we are embracing ourselves, be it our hair, be it our skin color. But it has not always been that way. So I appreciate you sharing your truth. And especially, I'm hearing Black text, the sort of like when you said, you can just, work your way to a better situation. Those of us within the Black community, we've heard that in some way or another. And once we get to a certain age, we say, that's not it. That's not it, So I appreciate you sharing your truth. And I hope that we have some listeners who are really taking away, some realness, right? So you being real, and I appreciate that, that you being in that space. So as we continue to our next question, and I know, like I said, we've been touching on things throughout. So just adding on, if you will, what are some effective strategies and coping mechanism that teens can use to manage their anxiety? Mr. Ware, if you want to chime in, I know last Miss Dade shared, and then I, added on, and that was such a heartfelt moment. So if you could just help us out with this one, start off, please.
So one of the things that teens can do, like first, I mean, you'll know it as a teacher, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you're not getting your basic needs, nothing else works, which makes it difficult, getting enough sleep, getting enough, the proper food. Because, traditionally inner city places are food deserts. So they're packed full of ultra processed garbage, is best way I can put it. And yes, there's food banks, but a lot of times those food banks are full of ultra processed foods. Now it's improved. I don't know about where you all, sorry, that was my dog, live, but here in here in the Seattle area, you go to any food bank, almost every food bank you're getting fresh fruits and vegetables because the farmers who can't sell, or it's like imperfect, they give to their local food banks. And so you can go to a food bank and get more fresh produce than you can processed stuff. Doesn't mean it's not there. And so like that's one of the biggest things, getting good food, not just garbage that just fills you, or it doesn't even really fill you, frankly, which makes it hard because where I live at, I'm South Seattle, the closest store that has like more good whole grain type foods is probably like a 30-minute drive. Well, it's about an hour by bus. How you gonna get there? Especially if you work in one or two, 3 jobs. And the food in schools is a joke. Even when I was a kid, it's a joke. It's ultra processed. I don't even know if some of it classifies as food. And so the fact that these kids are getting most of their food from unhealthy sources puts a detriment, because there's enough studies out there that show that the link between ultra processed foods with dyes in it cause anxiety, cause ADHD, damage the brain, damage the nervous system. That's the reason why Europe has banned all of them. That's the reason why I'm glad California started the march of like, they've banned, I think, red dye number 40, I think yellow 5 and a blue, because there's nothing we can do. because most of the ultra processed foods are packed full of sugar, salt, chemicals that I'm like I had a hard time the other day at the store next to me trying to find just plain old yeast. There's quick rise yeast, and they just putting chemicals in it. And I'm like, can I just have yeast? Can I just have yeast, please? I don't want all the other garbage. And you know, uh, hiding so many things, but like, and most of the things I wrote down, I was thinking like these are difficult things, but they're doable. Sleep is another thing. We never function well on with lack of sleep. However, I mean, to my comment earlier, where there was 18 shots at the fast food place next across the street from my apartment building, and two bullets went through a window. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. But it's like, imagine trying to sleep in that as an adult, and then make it a child, make it a teenager. Like, well, I just watched two bullets go sink into my wall because and I don't know how to get out. When I was working in Houston as a teacher, my wife and I were working in Houston as teacher. The kids were living in burnout buildings. There was no food, no electric, no water, no nothing, and their only safe space they had was school. They had nothing else. Their parents, who knows where they're at. So it's like these basic things of Maslow was just like, if you're living in that, how do you get, how do you get anywhere, any traction? Barely surviving on what you got. The physical exercise is always important, but more important is getting enough fuel in your system. Um, Having that third space, as Miss Dade talked about, I was thinking about like the lack of resources, and one of my biggest frustrations about the King County area where I live, there are zero places for kids to get help who are have behavior concerns. And I'm not talking about like what mental health therapists have done, with oppositional defiant disorder or conduct disorder, where it's like if you have any melanin, they're going to hand it to you because you didn't fit the mold. Like when they have genuine like these disorders, or the damage to the brain has been so much that like their ADHD is through the roof and their impulsivity. I mean, I have kids that just run around the classroom because they can't stop. I mean, even with Adderall, they can't stop. Um, but it's like they don't have any spaces like Boys and Girls Club or things like that. And a lot of the programs here in the county, there are zero jail diversion programs for anybody under 14. They don't start till 14. And it's like, but the consent age, for mental health services is 13. So we have a year to try to undo 12 years of damage. There's no way we can do it. But some other things, so those are like the struggles, the barriers that are just common, probably no matter where you go. But building in hobbies, even if it's not acceptable, like do something. Even like with the exercise, I've talked with some kids and like just do push-ups, sit-ups. At least you're getting some exercise. You're getting active. I know you can't walk around your neighborhood because of the laundry list of reasons, but it's like get you a bag of sand, or something to help out with that. A couple other things. Getting outside as much as you can, or at least trying to like see nature. That really helps out when we reconnect back into nature. And a lot of folks I know talk about grounding or talking about breathing exercises. Two of the things that those things need is a safe, comfortable space. And grounding is actually where you have to take your shoes and socks off and touch grass. And so I tell kids like, oh, if you don't feel comfortable, touch the grass with your hands, touch leaves, touch trees. And I know like here in the Pacific Northwest, like there's a reason why they call us the evergreen state. There's trees everywhere, like there's oak trees everywhere, especially evergreen. And so it's easier here. But I think about my students in Houston, can't find a tree, like barely find grass. And so it's finding it where you're at as best as you can. Um, and I don't know about the age of consent in different states, but I know here in Washington, 13, they can go see their own. They can engage in services. They can actually take themselves to substance use and residential care by themselves. But chatting with the school counselor, going to these organizations like Boys and Girls Club or DCYF or the YM or the YWCA, because they're gonna have the pamphlets for 988, 211, like all the local resources. Finding them um, can help as well, because I know here in Washington there's a lot of different ways to get it, because we're advertising it everywhere, but like especially in those places that don't. And one of the things I wanted to put out there, and it's the only reason I'm saying it is because they have a good program. It's called Lambert House here in Seattle, Washington. A lot of the kiddos I work with are LGBT community. Lambert House supports those kids and even does online, so you don't have to be in the state. And they have support groups. They have help. Things like the Trevor Project or the Lavender Project here, where it's catering to kids of color, and in the not just LBGT, but like also other groups. And so like finding those online sources, like if you're in a desert of any resource, finding places like NAMI or those type. That's why 211 and I know 988 is the emergency line, but they also still connect to services. Even going on their website, they have tons of services just like 211 does. So finding those that help, because you need your third space. I like how you said it, Ms. Day. So I'm like, that's gonna be the new phrase now.
Right, exactly. Well, thank you for sharing like all of that, from the strategy to the resources. You actually helping us in a good space as we flow towards our end. So if you want to chime in, Ms. Dade, and just, between the both of you, any final thoughts about how schools can better support parents and resources. Again, you kind of already started that. Thank you so much, Mr. Ware. But Ms. Dade, if you can add, and then if you want to finalize anything after Ms. Dade adds, Mr. Ware, and that'll be our show. So go ahead, Ms. Dade. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I don't think I have anything to add for the coping mechanisms or strategies. I feel like those were really well expressed. I personally would just say, thank you to, you all who are able to work directly with students and be like a safe space for them. Because, as you mentioned, Mr. Aware, school is oftentimes that safe space, and the teachers and the staff at those schools are able to provide students with that safety that they might not be able to get anywhere else. And that's a really powerful superpower, honestly, that you have. And yeah, I would just say just thank you for being able to do that. I haven't been directly a teacher in the school setting. Prior to the pandemic, I was doing some facilitation in Chicago public schools, and being able to work directly with students through a separate organization, a separate nonprofit, but that was a really powerful experience. And yeah, I would just say, thank you for doing what you do. It's not easy, but it really matters.
No, thank you for that, because like I would say the same about you all, because like I only see kids. I do 45-minute sessions, so I see them 45 minutes a week, and so that's why I refer them to folks like yourself or organizations like yourself or other ones, because I'm like, they need as many hands helping them uh, get up out of the muck, so to speak. And I guess my final thought, I don't know if we just we lost her, but um, being okay with getting help as a parent. I've spent 13, what is this, 14 years in therapy, from my childhood, being a veteran. What schools can do better is being allowing advocating for your kids about like they need sleep, they need help. Like it's talk with agencies like who I work for because there's several school based mental health agencies here in the Pacific Northwest, or at least in Washington, but like advocating for those so that way they can get help, teach because I do a lot of like whole classroom instruction around topics just like this. So, yeah, thank you for so much for help because we can't do it alone.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, and I guess I'm happy to add a little bit more about some of the stuff that I directly do with Communicate for Health Justice. At one point, we did have an active blog where young folks, people who are maybe in school, undergrad or graduate school, or even high school, they're able to contribute to their thoughts about health related topics, and a lot of that could be related to mental health and mental health equity and issues of that nature. So yeah.
And I like how you brought it up. It's health because I know that
Mhm.
even this is called, Black Mental Health Matters. It's just health, and like America is one of the last countries to realize, at least industrialized countries, to realize that it's called health. There's no difference between mental and physical health because we're one body. So thank you for bringing that in.
Thank you both so much. I'm so grateful to share this space with you and just allow for you to have an opportunity to share with the listeners. So, well wishes and thank you so much. So grateful for you.
Thank you for
Thank
having me.
Of course.
thank you so much,
Bye.
Lakeisha.
You're welcome. Have a great day.